What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the one and only Tesla stock, you should be looking after for the future. I'm also going to break down what the new data and technicals are telling us about the overall market in Tesla, how this may actually affect the share price moving forward, and also some very big pieces of news coming out for tomorrow that will affect the entire market, including Tesla. But before I break anything down about all of this information, before I get into any more details, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. And the last thing is, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you're guaranteed up to 12 free stocks, each worth up to $3,000. And the best part is, any could be a free Tesla share. The offer ends tomorrow, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. So Tesla is actually down about 1.53% for the day. In my previous video, I made a prediction that Tesla would actually see a bit of a drop than a bounce, but the levels I predicted were actually quite different from what actually played out. I told you guys that Tesla would likely actually come down to this like 163 level, maybe a little bit lower than that. Then we'd see a pretty decent sized bounce, and Tesla would try to push back up to this like 165 level. And I was hoping Tesla would actually try to break above this and continue going. And so far, if you look at SPY, we actually saw a full recovery on SPY closing green. On the QQQ, something quite similar happened. This thing is only down 0.2%. It came down pretty hard to this like a little bit under 314. It got a nice bounce after that and actually closed just below the 50 and the 200 EMAs, just barely in the red. But Tesla didn't actually do this. So I was correct about SPY and the QQQ. I thought Tesla would actually hold up a lot better, but it had some relative weakness. It actually failed to keep up with the market. And now the question is, how is Tesla going to move and what levels should we be watching? But before I talk about the levels and the technicals, I need to talk about something else that's very, very important about Tesla and the markets. We have some very important earnings coming out. And to start us off, we actually had some big earnings that just came out a couple of hours ago. First Republic Bank just reported their earnings and was not actually what we wanted. So what's good about it is the fact that we had a 30% EPS beat of $1.23 versus 72 cents expected. They beat on revenue, so all of this was pretty good to start us off. But then when you look at the total deposits, this was absolutely horrendous. Deposits are down 40% from 176 billion in Q4. So in total, there was that and also other factors. Their deposits are down 40% to $104.5 billion in Q1, and that's actually pretty bad. But you also have to consider the fact that other bigger banks gave First Republic Bank $30 billion to help it survive and to give it extra leverage. So if you actually exclude that from this $104.5 billion, you're actually going to see only $74 billion. That is a massive, massive loss compared to the previous quarter. That's over $100 billion right here. They lost $102 billion in customer deposits, and that's actually a pretty bad piece of news. But the real question is, what is so bad about this? And you have to think about the way our economy functions right now. Right now, we have these banks that are actually artificially injecting money into the economy by lending out all this money. And they want depositors because the depositors help the banks essentially get leverage. They lend out that money so that they actually use it to invest in assets and etc. And now that they're losing a lot of customer deposits and people are de-incentivized from putting in more money in the banks, what's happening is the banks have to actually give out higher yields. They're going to try to use that strategy to get more people in, which could actually induce bigger losses for them. And on top of that, if the banks are not lending out as much money, what happens to everyday people and businesses? They don't have as much money coming into their hands, so they're not spending as much money. So this could actually slow down spending in the economy. It could actually slow down growth for businesses, and in essence, this could actually lead to even more problems. So I do believe that there are some concerns now about, the banking situation. Sentiment could shift a little bit after this news came out. That could be a little bit negative for the stock market. However, this does not guarantee the market's going to straight up just crash on its face or anything like that just yet. That's going to also depend on many other factors. If you look at bonds, I know this is not showing them, but almost every bond is now inverted, suggesting a recession is around the corner. And that's once again something we have to be prepared for. Now, when it comes to big earnings, you guys have to be ready for this. So for Tuesday, we're going to start off with Verizon and UPS and McDonald's and a couple of other ones. Not too huge in the morning. I do think the market's going to see some sideways action, and then we're going to see a very big reaction after the market closes tomorrow, and then going into Wednesday, on Thursday, and also Friday to all of these big earnings. Because remember, the real reaction to Microsoft and Alphabet will be shown on Wednesday. For Meta, it's going to happen on Thursday, and then for Friday, by the time we get to Friday, we're going to see the real reaction to Amazon because all of these companies are reporting after the market closes. But the bottom line is, tomorrow after the market closes, huge data is coming out. We have on Tuesday Microsoft and Alphabet, aka Google, and that's going to be massive. It's going to affect Tesla, the entire market. If these companies actually beat expectations and the outlook is okay for them, if they do actually help bring a lot of the heads up for many investors, we could see the market actually like this and try to get a bounce. And this could actually help Tesla. But, but if these companies miss on earnings, expect the market to actually see a very volatile move and a bit of a sell off. Quite significant sell off could come just off Alphabet alone. And we actually have Microsoft and Alphabet. So, very, very big day. Make sure you are ready for this tomorrow. It's going to be huge. Now, on top of that, we also have some data coming out. I mean, tomorrow is not too significant, just some housing data and crude oil data and the building permits data. Not as significant as earnings, but it is worth noting. The real significant data is going to be coming out more towards Thursday and Friday as we have initial jobless claims, the GDP numbers, and then also PCE on Friday. So be on the lookout for the big data on those days. Until then, let's talk about Tesla. So for Tesla, there wasn't a whole lot of news that came out that was super, super significant. I just want to note that their inventory levels are still dropping a bit, but they're not dropping as hard as before. We saw this just around 363. Now it's closer to like 350. So that is a good sign because of all of the price cuts ever since the sixth price cut ended up coming. This was dropping, which is a good piece of news for us. I want to see this continue to tumble down, but Elon Musk did actually warn everyone very recently that Tesla is willing to take a loss for their cars. They're willing to do that. Why? So that they could actually get more people to actually buy their products or more people to continue to be a part of the Tesla ecosystem. Meaning that when an individual buys the Tesla, they're going to be more interested in the brand, spend more money on different products, and also they can incentivize more people to do the same things. There could also be those like monthly expenditures with buying a Tesla, and that in essence could also help Tesla. That's what Elon Musk is actually talking about. And he also is saying this because he knows a recession is coming. He did say this many, many times, and that's why we have to be ready for it. Now, for the price price ratio, likely going to start dropping a bit if Tesla continues to underperform. So far, it has been doing that. And this tells me that Tesla needs to get a good bounce above a certain level I'm going to talk about later. It has to do that, or else things could get very, very ugly. Now, Goldman Sachs is saying to buy Tesla. We're getting some buy ratings. Also, Truist. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but they're basically saying to hold on to your Tesla shares. On top of that, Tesla tends to be green 51% of the time on Tuesday, so it's pretty much 50-50. And then there's not as much shorting going on, so I don't really see Tesla just straight up crashing immediately unless there's a very bad piece of news. But I could still see it actually trail behind if things don't go its way. Now, the last two pieces of news are Tesla is rumored to be importing its new cheap Model Y variants into Canada from China. That's just another rumor that's coming out. If this does end up being the case, this could be very big during times like this, as individuals do not have as much spending power and they are incentivized to spend more money on things that are a lot more affordable. Tesla is working very hard to actually launch a more affordable car, but we need more details to come out. And if it does happen, that would be very, very good news. So I really hope that there is truth behind this. And that's what's been making a lot of the headlines right now. Also, Tesla just tweeted this, I believe, very early, just a couple of hours ago. And that's the fact that Tesla is helping to transition away from fossil fuels to accelerate our transition to sustainable energy. They also mentioned that each gigafactory we build is more efficient than the last, reducing their vehicles' carbon footprint even further. So it's very important for companies to reiterate their vision, and this will incentivize more people to buy into Tesla, to buy Teslas in general. And once again, great for the company's fundamentals. Now let's talk about the charts. All right, what's happening with the markets? Now, in the morning, I gave you guys another update because I realized that Tesla broke below 163. It was looking pretty weak. So around this period right here around the time the market opens when I released the video. I warned you guys that this was my latest video besides this one, by the way. I warned you guys that Tesla could see a little bit of downside, and I would be very cautious. I told you all that if it failed to hold 160, I'd be watching 157.5. We ended up bouncing around 158.6, not too far from that. And so far, it actually managed to hold above 160, but it's still not necessarily in the clear just yet. Because when you zoom out of Tesla, and let me just hide the extended hours, there's one thing that's not too good for it, and that's the fact that Tesla has that giant gap that a lot of people have been talking about. Not the one above, but the one below, all the way down to the 140 area. This is around 143. If Tesla, okay, fails to hold 166, if we can't hold that and we don't actually break to retest 170 or even break that, if it remains in this chop area and it does not get a clean break, it is most likely going to just start filling this gap and come all the way down to the 140s, unfortunately. That is most likely going to happen if it fails to get the bounce we want. There's a small bullish divergence on Tesla, but there's no guarantee it's going to be that massive. That's going to depend now heavily on the earnings that are coming out and also the data, because we have PCE coming out by Friday and then initial jobless claims for Thursday. All right, guys. Now let me just break down the specific levels for Tesla, what I'm watching for, and what I believe is likely to happen. But always be open to anything, because I'm a human. I can't always be right. I'm not always wrong. I'm not always right either. But most of the time, I do tend to be correct about where Tesla goes. But I just want to let you know that the market could be very crazy and have some crazy reactions. But just look at these levels. If you're bullish on Tesla, if we're going to be bullish, you want to watch it hold 163. If it holds that, we're going to likely try to retest this 165 to 166 supply zone. This is where Tesla gets a lot of these rejections. In order for this thing to turn very bullish, we need a catalyst. That's the first thing we need. Who knows? Maybe it's going to be earnings later during the week. Maybe it's going to be a big piece of news. We need something. There has to be some piece of news. And if it comes out, you're going to be watching Tesla break 166 to turn bullish and try to retest about 170. If it breaks 166, it's likely going to shoot to 170, but so far it's failed to do that. Now, secondly, if you're super bearish on Tesla, if you think this thing is going to crash, and if that is the case, what do we have to watch for? Tesla's likely going to trail down if that's the case, and then retest this 160 area. That is somewhat significant support, but we have more significant support around this 158 to 157.5 zone. Very, very important area right there. It needs to hold that and get another bounce off that area, because if it fails to hold 157.5, it's going to tank to 155 and maybe come closer to the very low 150s. All right. So we have to watch these both very carefully. Additionally, if Tesla does come that low, it would have failed to actually break above 166. And then the odds would favor the gap fill down to the 140s. I was initially thinking that there was a good chance Tesla would try to push up a little bit more than this before we break down, because I was telling you Tesla would likely fill that gap below in the future, going into like the month of May. I still stand by that, but I'm still hoping that this thing could try to hold up. Once again, guys, it's going to depend heavily on the earnings that come out. But what I do want to note that is actually and also like super, super important for Tesla going forward would be the fact that when you look at the market, we're in a very indecisive position right now. Looking at SPY, this thing did try to break above this resistance, right? Very important resistance was right over here. Let me just bring back the extended hours, by the way. We had some very important resistance. We broke above it temporarily, right? We were chomping back and forth in this channel. We broke above it. And now, if you look at SPY on the extended hours time frame, look at the 200 EMA. We basically ping pong off of it. We hit it. We bounced. We bounced. We bounced. So the question is, are we about to retest it? In my opinion, if you're bullish on SPY, you're going to be watching this thing break above this 413 area to try to fill the gap to 414. If you're bearish on SPY, you're going to watch it retest the 200 EMA around this 410 area, and it has to break below that for you to turn very bearish. And then it could actually come down to the support closer to the 409 area, and that's when things would not look as good. But what do I see happening, right? I went over the bullish and bearish cases. Here's the problem. There is one problem, and that's the fact that, yes, technicals were a little bit more in favor of the bulls. But here's the problem. The problem is with the First Republic Bank news that just came out, this could actually incite more fear involving the banking situation. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is like a bit of a pullback in the morning, a retest of this line, which is going to be closer to 411. And then we try to bounce off of it and we just trade very sideways to close the day. And I believe that the market's just going to be waiting for the very big tech earnings. I think that's what we're waiting for. I think the odds favor us maybe coming down to, touch this and then try to bounce. But I'm always prepared for anything just in case because of how unpredictable the market could be. Then we're just going to react in a massive way to the Microsoft earnings, the Alphabet earnings, and etc. For Coinbase, this is continuing to sell off. Almost every single day is just selling, selling, selling. It is quite oversold right now. But in order for this to turn bullish, we have to hold 54. If we break above it and we start pushing up, it has the potential to try to retest 58, break above that, then there's 61. If we're bearish and 54 fails, it's most likely going to come all the way down to 50 flat. What is more likely to happen? Well, there's no confirmation of a bounce. The MACD looks like it's actually losing lots of the bearish momentum, but the RSI is still kind of indecisive, not really giving us much of a divergence. It looks to me like this thing is just going to remain very choppy. It might actually break below 54 because of the banking news if the market does pull back because of that, but there's a good chance it's going to what's the word? It's going to base like very, very soon. The dollar, whoops, sorry about that, guys. The dollar index is basically doing something else that's very interesting. I just wanted to note, guys, that the dollar is very flat. The dollar is continuing to just trade sideways back and forth and back and forth. There's not real confirmation of the breakout yet, but we do have a bullish divergence on the weekly time frame, which tells me the dollar might break out in the future, probably during the month of May, when we start to see more selling in the markets, in my opinion. Right? There's that saying, sell in May, go away, right? I believe there's going to be truth behind that, and I do believe a sell-off is coming for that period. Before that, until the time comes, like for the next week, the dollar is just trading flat. It's not really doing too much. It's trending below the weekly 5 EMA. Not really too much is going on. For NEO, this did something similar to what I predicted. I told you it would likely try to make an attempt to get closer to 50 EMA. It got kind of close to it if you actually exclude the extended hours, and now it's just chopping back and forth and barcoding. That tells me that, once again, the algos are taking over. We do technically have a bullish divergence on NEO, but we'll have to wait and see if we can actually get closer to this gap resistance around this 8.5 area. It looks to me like it's likely going to just chop around a bit, not really do a whole lot. It might pull back in the morning thanks to First Republic Bank, and then it might try to bounce after that and just trade sideways going forward. For Microsoft, this is going to be a big one. I'm not 100% sure how this is going to move because right now technicals don't matter as much. From a technical standpoint, it looks like it might try to actually hold up. We do have a technical divergence that formed right here. But once again, we have earnings coming out. And what tends to happen during earnings is when market stocks like this tend to push up. It's not really doing that so far. So it looks to me like it's just going to trade sideways, maybe cool off a little bit. Just not really do too much. I believe it's just waiting for earnings. There might even be an end of the day sell off for Microsoft because so far it's just not getting the balance it typically gets. And we might see, some expectations not be the best for it. Just so you guys know, if Microsoft and Google do better than expected or as expected for earnings and the outlook is fine, the stock market could bounce off of that. It's still a possibility, but right now we just have to wait and see what happens when it comes out. For the QQQ, this is once again pretty flat. I'm anticipating a little bit of downside because of what happened with the bank, then a bit of a bounce and just a lot more choppy price action. For us to turn bullish, it has to break above the 200 EMA. For it to become bearish, we have to actually break below this 314 area because we have a gap down. I believe it's in the 312s. It could come down to fill the gap around there if it breaks below 314 again. But if it actually, holds the gap support around that area, then it's not going to do that just yet. I'm seeing just boring, choppy, sideways price action, just bouncing between 314 to about the 316 zone around there, back and forth for tomorrow. Very flat close, and I just think we're getting ready for some big events. The VIX is trying to base around here. If the VIX truly has bottomed, which is a possibility, that would be bad news for the stock market. However, there's no true confirmation of that yet. It has tried to base around the 16 area, but it has not been able to close above the 50 EMA. So very mixed news for the VIX. It's just going back and forth, not doing a whole lot. We did get a pump up to 18 temporarily today before it came down. We'll see what this thing does. It looks to me like it might make an attempt once again to try to get above the 50 EMA. but it is going to be impacted by the markets because it could always come down even more if we do get some stronger than expected earnings. So very indecisive on the VIX for now. Here's what I do know about it though. For the medium term, for May to June, I do believe this thing is going to see a big spike above 25. I do believe it's most likely going to happen, but we have to be patient until then. For Amazon, this thing actually sold off a little bit today after getting a big pump in the morning. It's likely going to try to hover above the 50 EMA, so around this 105 area. If it does bounce, it could actually try to get back to this 108 area. Because once again, we're getting very close to its earnings, and Amazon does have a tendency of pumping before the big events. It was doing well in the morning. It is cooling off a little bit. So what I think is going to happen though is Amazon might cool off in the morning to retest like 104, then bounce off that, trade very, very flat before the big earnings. Nvidia, same thing. I'm anticipating it to actually come down to about this 268 to 266 zone, bounce off that, retest 270 and close very, very flat, not really doing too much. Apple might end up coming down to test the 200 EMA around this 164 area, maybe a little bit lower, 163, try to bounce off that. And once again, also trade flat as we're getting very close to big earnings. It's very likely most of the market will do this because the earnings are just going to be very telling and the market tends to be very patient approaching these events. Now, we have a possible head and shoulders developing on the 10-year treasury yield. If this does play out and this thing starts tanking, that's going to be bullish news for the stock market. The market could start pumping off the earnings. But if this thing actually bounces off 35 like it has in the past, it could come up to fill this gap. If it does that, that is going to become, once again, a little bit more bearish for the stock market. So far, it's just very indecisive, but there is a possible head and shoulders developing, which tells me there is a possibility of upside to come. Once again, guys, the technicals are looking pretty decent for SPY if you exclude the news that came out. We did actually break above this resistance, which is a pretty good sign. So could we come down to test it and then try to bounce, or are we going to test the 200 EMA? Most likely it's going to be one of those two. We come down just a little bit to retest and then we try to bounce and we just close very flat again. And then we're going to just react to Microsoft and the big earnings for Google. We'll see what happens. I'm really open to anything. From a bigger standpoint, from a much larger technical standpoint, I'm seeing this for SPY. There is weakening momentum on the MACD, but there are two possibilities since we are technically above this resistance. Two possibilities. Number one, the market might shop around a bit and then get a big sell-off in May. The reason for that is because of the weakening momentum, the fact that we're overextended. We pumped so much without any like sort of like really decent pullback, and also because of the fact that earnings might not be the best. But the second possibility could be another push up. We get one more pump to the upside up to 418 to 420, and that ends up happening because of better than expected earnings from some of these big tech stocks. And then we reject off 420 or so as we're getting lots of sell signals and lots of price exhaustion. Then we get a very healthy pullback during the May period. So I'm seeing a pullback in May coming. I just don't know if the market's going to just trade sideways from here and just pull back from here, or if we could get one more pump. It's got to be one of those two. And I say that because it depends on earnings, which I can't really predict perfectly. So for Tesla, just to end the video, what am I predicting for tomorrow? Just so you guys are aware, for Tesla to turn bullish, we have to retest 166 and break it. For us to become bearish, we have to see Tesla break below 160 and then 157.5. If it breaks below that, that's not going to be a good sign, and the odds will favor a gap fill to the downside, the big gap below into the 140s. Now, what do I think Tesla's going to do? Well, that's where things become very different. I believe Tesla might pull back a little bit in the morning, right? And that's because of the news that came out affecting the banks. It might retest this support zone right here. It may even get a little closer to 157.5 than try to bounce around there. And as long as it can actually bounce, there's a chance it could close a little bit in the red or very, very flat. But if it fails, if that happens, then it's just not going to be pretty. And this thing could start tanking pretty hard. Most likely, though, I do see it coming down a little bit, just trading sideways and getting ready for some very big earnings. And nonetheless, regardless of what happens, right? Regardless of if the market gets one more pump and Tesla tries to pump up again for the super short term or not, I do see Tesla eventually tanking to fill the gap in the 140s by the time we get to May. All right. I know it's unfortunate, but that is what is likely to happen. It's because of the fact that we're entering a recession. There's not much Tesla could do about it. As Tesla mentioned during their earnings, there's so many macroeconomic factors that are hurting them. All right, guys, so watch these levels carefully, be prepared for anything, and just look at my prediction as just one estimation. I can't always be perfect and correct. No one's always perfect and correct when predicting what the market will do, but I am correct most of the time, and I still do this for you because I appreciate everyone. I want to do what's best for your own opinions. All right, so thank you all for listening. Be prepared for some very, very interesting price action, maybe a bit of a sell off sometime as the market opens. That would be completely fine before we do get somewhat of a bounce, hopefully. And that could also reflect on Tesla. But if Tesla fails to get a decent bounce, then expect more downside. All right. Thank you all for listening. The last thing I want to say is I have some merch for you guys around the comments section if you are interested. If not, it's completely fine with me. I also have the Weeble link down below in the description for you guys. It ends tomorrow if you guys want the offer. Thank you for listening. Tesla to the moon because the long term is still very bright, and peace out.